Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast, hosted by Joshua Shaw and Ryan Buckeye.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome inside the Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast. It is 2020. It's fucking a new decade. A new decade. This is cool. The Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast has spanned 2 decades, Josh. 2 decades.
It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, we're epic. I mean, like literally, like 2 decades, 2 years, 30 plus episodes. We're making some milestones here.
We really are. We really are. And before we went on, I gotta say this. Before we went on the air, this is a tidbit I learned about Josh. He can fit in the small polos, smalls, mediums.
Yeah, mediums. Yeah. So if you ever look at me and you think, man, it looks like he kind of has a little bit, like maybe like 1% muscle. It's all an illusion. It's because I wear the tightest clothes possible to accentuate just that 0.1% muscle that I do have.
Correct. And a lot of the stuff that you put out there is video content. Your video editing skills are phenomenal.
Yeah. Literally anytime you ever see like a little bit of a vein pop in one of my videos, it's all CGI. It's not real. Yeah,
I need to learn that for this year.
I have a pretty big budget on that kind of stuff. So, you know, I got back pocket. I got Disney in my back pocket, Netflix. I got a bunch of money behind this. So,
I like it.
You know, yeah.
I mean, we a couple weeks ago we talked about the vision board for 2020. I think I forgot to put that one on there. I need to learn how to do some of the CGI stuff for this year. Talking about like spanning the decades and stuff. Something that I think is interesting, and I come from the space, the CPG space, but within our world, dietary supplements, fitness, apparel, whatever it might be, is just like the aesthetics of a brand and how to separate your brand aesthetically from everybody else. Because Josh, you and I have seen or come across many brands who are aesthetically cool, but the products themselves might be garbage. Like the products themselves are secondary, but they want to be cool. They want to stand out on shelf. They want to have a cool logo. They want to have a cool theme behind their website. And kind of what we want to talk about today is like really, I mean, in the realm of sports nutrition and fitness, there are a ton of brands that come out like every week. And I'm still utterly shocked how many people don't put any thought or any time or effort into just like package design alone. Like even like this is a total war if you're watching on YouTube. Like it's simple, but it's effective, and obviously Redcon's doing something right. But I see a lot of trash graphics all the time, and then to me it's unexcusable.
Yeah, you know, label or packaging, design, all those things. I mean, it's a lot subjective, but there is a level of like it just looks like shit.
Yeah.
And I don't care like what kind of design eye you have or not. You need to at least be looking at something from a standpoint of this just looks like shit. We need to fix this. And I'm actually surprised as well because with the age now of just like Fiverr and like all these different freelance services that you literally can find anybody that can do anything for you for a pretty manageable price. Now, it might not be, you know, world-class designer or whatever, but it's going to look better than like the MS Paint type of labels that some of these guys put out. And you know, and their argument is always, well, you know, we put out a really good product. We don't have the marketing dollars. We don't have the margin. We don't have all these types of things. That is completely the wrong mentality in this today because there's so many great products. There's so many great labels. There's so many great attributes of everything. So you have to be, you know, at least to a certain level to get a fresh look from consumers. If not, there's just so many other substitutes out there.
Yeah. I will let people in on a huge secret in 2020. Like I have thought about, and we've talked about this before, like started my own brand, started my own supplement company before. I literally have a product package design and a prototype of a sports nutritional supplement at my house for the brand. That should I ever release one, that I put that much thought process into something that's not even going to happen tomorrow, but because it was so important that I had a really cool label, a cool concept, a cool package design. And sure, it just sits on my shelf, and I haven't showed anybody this, and I'm not going to anytime soon. But like, I look at it every day and be like, I'm proud of that. If I ever did come out with something, this is what it should look like. But I mean, so there's two folds here. There is essentially, like we live in an Instagram world, but there is the traditional brick and mortar store. Like, how do you stand out on shelf at a place like that? And then obviously what we know is like the Amazon effect, like the digital shelf. How do you stand out on a digital shelf? One thing was, speaking of Amazon, if you ever looked up like say turmeric on Amazon, right? Like just a generic ingredient, useful but generic, you'll see label designs that are very eerie similar to one another. Josh, what's that called when these labels are so similar to, like, what are these contract manufacturers doing to people? Like, they pretty much just say, like, it's like buying a house, right? Like, you go in these neighborhoods, it's like, you have 8 designs, pick one. And within those designs, you can change the colors. But that's exactly what that is.
Yeah, it's these services they add on to their white labeling where basically they say, hey, we can do all this stuff in-house for you. Now, you're not going to have, the variety of hiring your own designer because they already kind of have the templates ready. But yeah, you can see the copycat syndrome happening on Amazon a lot, specifically around some of those very basic ingredients, or sometimes even in the sports world, you could see them in some basic like fat burners or maybe a pump product or something like that. You could start to see that there's a lot of ones that are pretty close to each other.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why it's so easy to start a brand, because you don't really have to have skills. You just have to go to one of these manufacturers that you see running an ad on Facebook and have enough money to run for 144 units or whatever it is that we talked about. But I think there is a difference. Like, let's first talk about the difference between brick and mortar and digital. Like, is there a difference in the shopping experience for the consumer? And the answer, yes, to an extent. So, like, for you, Josh, like when you go into, like, we were just talking about Under Armour before we came on. Like, I don't love buying things online when it comes to clothes, because I actually like to feel the stuff and see if it fits, which is a different category. But, like, is there anything, like, within our category that you like to go into the store to look for?
I mean, I go into the store a lot of times mostly for like research purposes over just like the shopping experience. I'd like to see a lot of like the merchandising and how things are set up and different types of situations. That's probably more on like grocery or convenience stores or like the larger channels than it is going into like a mom and pop supplement store or a lot of times even like a GNC or a Vitamin Shop. And a lot of times that's because things haven't changed all that much. Like, I know what I'm going to experience when I get in the door there. So it's not all that much different that I need to constantly go and check something else out. And there's a stark difference between these kind of the specialty channel and like supplements and then like the more larger channels in terms of like what type of appearance you need to kind of convey with your packaging or your design. So on brick and mortar side, I think there's a splinter as well, where if you're just a supplement brand and you're like, hey, I just want to sell to small supplement shops, I'm going to be one of those types of brands. There's a certain way that you probably design the way your product looks and things for those. And then if you want to go into 7-Eleven or you want to go into Whole Foods or you want to go into Target or something like that, that's a completely different type of thing. And even within the product categories, things have to be completely different. Because if you're in a cooler, now the lighting in the cooler looks differently than the lighting in the rest of the store. And sometimes the sections in the beauty section maybe has different lighting. So there's all these kind of things that you have to start to like layer in depending on the strategy in which you're trying to like attack the sales channels with. So there's and I don't want us to get into like the crazy specifics of like all these things, but I think it's important for entrepreneurs to think about that, like work backwards from some of these goals and then figure out, okay, how do I have to set up my labels to work best for like the sales strategy that I'm kind of going after. Yeah.
The best brands are able to create a single label that works well and plays well in both worlds. And we'll talk about our brand of the year and the brand of the year that you picked, Ghost, for this year. Like, we talk about them a lot, but that's because they do really well in terms of aesthetically, design work, and YouTube. But if you say you pick up a thing of Ghost Legend in a GNC, right? You can feel it. There's like, what's that? It's textured. So for brick and mortar, like you can feel it. It looks cool. Like the red pops. It works really well in brick and mortar, but it also works really well in a digital store because it's just a cool label. Like it's uniquely designed. It was different than anything that was out there until some of the copycats came into the world. But I mean, they created something that was uniquely different for both channels that worked really well. I'm not saying you have to create a textured label to win in brick and mortar. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like they did something unique for both channels essentially that worked really, really well. Another example, like in 2019, we saw Aspire Nutrition, not to put these two together, but like Aspire Nutrition did scratch and sniff labels. For brick and mortar, that's cool. Like, that's really cool. It's unique. It's different. Like, if you can literally scratch it, smell it, and then that engages your taste sense, you can understand, like, why somebody would buy it. On a digital storefront, it's worthless. It's worthless at that point. It's cool to be like, oh, my God, it's got scratch and sniff as a consumer. But digitally, it doesn't work. So then they would have to design their labels to be attractive digitally, which I think they've done a decent job of doing. But those are some cool things. Like, are there any brands that stand out to you within our space that you think tackle it? Besides the two I just mentioned, like that tackle it really well. Like, I mean, I know you went to Redcon, and like Redcon is they kill it in both brick and mortar and online. and their labels are just synergistic across, which I think is great. But like, are there any other brands that you've come across in the space, or whether maybe it's apparel brands or fitness equipment or whatever that does really well in both channels?
I think it comes down to how, I guess, complex some of these supplement companies want to get with their packaging. A lot of times it's an afterthought. And we're talking about the labels, like they just go after maybe a digital print, so they don't have any textures, they don't have any layers, they don't have any, different kind of special bells and whistles a part of it. They're just thinking, hey, I want to go do a digital print. That's going to be X per label. It works well on my basic black or white plastic bottle. That's going to be round. That's going to look like everybody else's, because I don't want to put any thought towards that, or maybe I don't have a lot of the extra money to be able to put into some custom molding or blow molding or any of those types of things. And I think that I look at brands that do some of those unique things. Some of they don't treat it like an afterthought. They actually put some effort into it. Ghost is a good example, because not only do they put a lot of thought into the actual label, but their packaging is custom. Dan is always over in China, working with their packaging suppliers over there to work with the custom lids or the custom bodies that have a certain kind of gloss or sheen to them. And on another one, we're talking about, both of us, with Performix, like they use a custom bottle, and they also have a kind of a cover that goes over top of it that you actually open. And this is the new stuff now. I don't know if people have tried the product before. Obviously, they had some different packaging, but today they have packaging where you kind of have a pull tab, and it's like an experience when you open it. And I think that, for me, those things stand out. I don't necessarily know a lot of times what the value is to the full set of consumers. I think there's a lot of people that enjoy that, and they definitely brings them back a little bit. But I don't necessarily think either one of those are a functionality based. There's not anything like functional to that point. I know that Ghost does have an element to their scoops that can fit into the top of them, so you don't have to go digging. That is a functional thing that people will appreciate, but you don't see a lot of like super functional packaging like you do in different consumer packaged goods categories. You don't see these like different detergent bottles or things that like revolutionize the way that like it could sit on a shelf and you can just kind of use it with a cup or something like that makes your life a little bit easier. For whatever reason, that level of packaging design has not hit the supplement industry yet, at least to a point that we've noticed a ton of it. Yeah,
and you mentioned Performix, and I think it's interesting because you walk into a vitamin shop, a GNC, or any sort of brick and mortar supplement store, everything is round. The vitamin bottles, the RTDs, the proteins, everything is round, and they came out and said we're going to do square. And it's different. And it's actually, honestly, like I have a couple of bottles over there. I think it's one of the coolest packages in the industry right now. So when you do the pull tab experience, you pull it off, like the actual unit itself is like one solid color, bright colors that stands out. I believe it's like rubberized texture too, and it's just, which is another thing too, like feel, like anytime you can engage the senses in package design or aesthetics, you're winning. And like even this thing at Total War I'm pulling up here, this was a special limited edition. I ordered this from Redcon specifically because I like the colors. Like I'm not even gonna open this. I don't open it because like I'm a big Miami Vice guy, and it had like the rubber textured lid on it, and like Black Market Labs is another example too. They have everything in matte black and soft touch lids. They are predominantly a brick and mortar brand. So they designed for that. But like a consumer picks up that product and it feels prestigious and premium to them. So they feel, even before looking at the label, because most of the consumers, even if they turn it over, have no fucking clue what they're looking at, right? Like they think this is a prestigious pre-workout because it feels cool in my hands. It looks really nice. I will pay $49.99 for that. Whether it's worth it or not, like they've already made their decision based on the package. It's no different than shopping for a car. If a car looks cool, you'll pay more for it. It's just, it's kind of like, it's what we do. But I think, the hardest part really in this world in 2020 now is like, how do you stand out on a digital shelf? Because a lot of it is going to be like, first it's search. A lot of consumers are going to be direct searching for probably your brand or your product, or say they type in pre-workout. Now you're one of 20 pre-workouts on page one. Like, how do you pop? Color, right? Like color design. They can't feel matte. They can't feel texture. So like in the digital world, it's interesting because when I was at Mills, what we did is we had our traditional package design, say for a cereal box, right? That you'd go to Walmart, you'd walk down the aisle, and you'd see that cereal box. But what we did for digital is we altered the image, and we made the predominantly like functional claims and the information on that was important. We enlarged it. We took stuff off the box that was actually on the real box. We took it off. So, for instance, if it had like 15 grams of protein, we made that bigger for the digital storefront, so a consumer could see that without having to read the text, because we're a visual-based purchasing system in this world, it seems like. But then if it had like, I don't know, something that was irrelevant to whatever it would be, we would take it off and we would just enlarge. Now, we don't really see that in this space. Like, what you see on a store shelf is what you're going to get on a digital shelf, which I'm interested to see if that would work. Like, this one here that I'm showing on YouTube, if you guys are watching or listening via Spotify, like, if it's important to you that a product has, say, 400 milligrams of caffeine, I'll just throw it out there, right? Like, and you can barely see it on the product, but if it's important, like, for their digital render, should they enlarge that? Should they make those functional claims bigger? Should they make some of these brand ingredients that they're using bigger and more predominant? Because if they don't, that requires a user to click onto that image, go into the product description, and then do this thing called reading, which doesn't happen very often. So, like, that concept that I used at a big Fortune 500 company has not happened here either. And I'm not necessarily shocked, but, like, I feel like there's an opportunity for brands to be like, you know what you buy or what you get in the mail doesn't necessarily have to be exactly what you see on a digital storefront.
Yeah, I haven't seen that specific one, what you're talking about. I know, and I'll talk just about like Amazon specifically because that's the biggest one. For the longest time, like their hero image, it needed to be a completely white background with your render, and that was basically it. But now they've kind of softened that a little bit because I think of the adoption over to mobile and the images being even smaller, where they're allowing some maybe like flavor splashes or an icon, or maybe you've seen some that have like on the side, the right or the left, they have like the servings and maybe the flavor or whatever it is. You don't see a lot of like the functional attributes in there, but you're seeing like a little bit of extra pizzazz, I guess, on these things, and that's not necessarily on the actual packaging. This is on just the hero image, but it's enough to attract somebody to go into the listing. And then at that point, it comes down to the written information, your product content, your images, your whatever it is that you have that's on there that can get somebody into your thing. Because the great thing about digital shelf is that you have so much more real estate to play with, to tell your brand story and the functionality of your products and all this kind of other stuff. But you still need to get somebody to initially click into that listing. And a lot of times that comes down to color, boldness of the claims. Like you said, I had not really seen that in our industry, but it makes a lot of sense. If you're able to call something out that is going to be one of the first like purchase criteria of your product, it's something to think about, as long as it doesn't like change the dynamics of design elements and stuff like that. And I think that's, you made a point about like with Ghost being well received on both sides. Their labels are very bold in terms of like seeing Ghost, and they're very brand forward, even though their products are good as well, but they're brand forward. So you could see that Ghost regardless if it's a very small image on your phone or if it's on your desktop.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And like, it's just interesting when you bring up Amazon. That was one of my final things I did when I was at Mills, was go through and like update the images on Amazon, because Amazon essentially now has like the slideshow effect, right? You can have up to 8 images, I think it is. You have your hero image, which at that point when I did that a year ago still need to be the white background. But then you could add like secondary images that call out some of these benefits. And so like, I'm just looking at some of the ones that I did here. It's like, okay, I tell more of a story with the images that I did, and I don't see that in our space. Like, you go and you look up a pre-workout, typically you're going to see the product image, the render, and then the ingredients label. That's it. Like, that's all you see on Amazon. Is that enough? Yeah, it probably could be. But like, I mean, you could show that image in use. I think you can even put video on Amazon now too.
Yeah, you can. Yep.
So like, even like a brand like Performix, which is doing really great with some video stuff with what they're doing with their SST, like that could be a place. That's, people give shit to bodybuilding.com all the time. You know this. They still have like one of the best shopping experiences, or at least landing pages for products that I've seen, because like aesthetically they're amazing. It tells the story, but it uses brand colors, brand images, like, and it's also readable text. So like Google search engine can read the text on top of these images. Like bodybuilding.com does a great job of that, and it provides all the relevant information. But then in those images, when you scroll through like a product page, it calls out the big nutritional benefits or the functional benefits, right? It talks about the creatine or the protein or whatever it is that you're looking for. I don't think like that's one way digitally really to separate yourself is not only like your image, but then how do you display the content that explains what your product is in a meaningful way that actually draws attention. And I think this space, we're so hesitant to spend money in places that don't necessarily directly go into, say, COGS or into your pocketbook that we just forget about, right? And it's the brands I think that invest in those spots are the ones who are ultimately going to have longevity and are ultimately going to win.
Yeah, and I don't want to obviously turn this podcast episode into like product content 101 or
we can do
anything like that,
now.
But I think brands do need to understand for the digital shelf, labeling is probably a smaller part of the bigger pie because you're having majority now of searches on search engines are non-branded search terms. So people are looking for pre-workout or they're looking for female pre-workout or whey protein powder. They're not looking for branded, X or Y. They're looking for that actual just common search terms. And then that pulls up however your SEO is on your, optimized for that search element. And then based around what that first image looks like, somebody is going, and there's, also like the title and things like that. Right. But like that image, like then they're going to at least click in. Now, when you click in, then you're at the point of you want to try to get the most amount of conversions possible because the more conversion percentage you have, the better rank you're going to get on an Amazon and things like that as well. So there's these elements on this digital shelf that are much kind of bigger to think about even sometimes than the label. So it goes back to like one of my original points of like, what is your actual sales strategy? What's your channel strategy? Are you really going to be a digital company and lean in digitally? Then maybe you're going to look at the way you design things much differently than if, hey, I want to be on Target shelf or, hey, I want to be on GNC. That's my goal. Then you might want to look at things a little bit differently. Now there's a blending of all of that works well if you're just a very great design brand like a Ghost, but a lot of times it comes down to sometimes like needing to lean in heavy on one side or the other.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too when you talk about label design, and since we're talking about it's like what you actually put on the label, what's important to be on the label. And I come from the world in which I love brand ingredients as a consumer because I understand them. But I see some of these labels sometimes that'll have like 8 logos of brand ingredients on there or like 6. And at the end of the day, I think to myself, that's a lot of real estate you just gave up. Yeah. For these brand now, unless it's a prerequisite from the brand ingredients, I don't know how that part. I don't think it is typically, but like like
sometimes it is. Yeah,
sometimes it is, right? Like you have to put the logo on there. Okay, but if you don't have to, no offense to the brand ingredients, I love them. No one's buying a fucking product because you have the X brand ingredient in it. Typically, like no one's buying a pre-workout because Compound Solutions Dynamine is in there. I love Dynamine. I love Teacrine. I don't know many consumers are going to actually seek out a product that contains them because they just don't know. So to give up I don't know, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch spot on your label design for that logo, like it might look better just to keep it clean or to call out like 300 milligrams of caffeine or something that might entice a consumer more to purchase that. What's your take on this? You can sell it all the time, like to branded ingredients or not to be brand ingredients on the actual label if you don't have to.
I always say that like products are starting to look like NASCARs.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many badges on these like things that like it's these little like stickers that are all on the NASCARs. And it's confusing to customers. Like it's to the point where like there's a fatigue with customers. They're like, what does this mean? Because there's not only like the branded ingredient logos on there, but you have brands that are just kind of creating a bunch of their own badges. Like, keto approved or all natural or like things that like really have like no meaning. But they put these little badges in there to look, I guess it's like a marketing thing.
Right.
They think that consumers are like, oh my God, like they don't know the difference between like project verified, non-GMO, like that's like a real organization over like these fake badges that they're creating. I don't really know like what the ideology, like what's the thought pattern on some of these brands, why they do that. But I've noticed this over the last couple of years that like if you turn it around, these bottles on the back, you see so many different little badges and logos and things. And for even somebody like myself, you see a branded ingredient, but what does that actually mean? Like a lot of times these branded ingredients are not necessarily ingredients that a common consumer would even know really what they are, or there's some kind of, so it comes down to then is the consumer going to go and do extra research, or is it just, oh, I see a branded ingredient and That's it. It must be quality. It must be great. And I think that a lot of times that's what brands are leaning on. They just think there's a default where consumers are just saying, oh shit, they have, these ingredients. Oh, I gotta buy this. Must be a good product, regardless of them actually knowing what the hell any of those things are. Because going back to like a previous episode, we talked about like third-party certifications and how bad they do at telling their story. Branded ingredient companies don't do a good job at telling their story either. Like they do a decent job. They're mostly like, again, science. They're like, oh, we have all these studies. Can a common person actually read a study and understand what the hell it means, or decipher if it's actually good or a bad study based around some inefficiencies of the study? No, it's like when I read a bunch of like financial statements and then I give it to somebody that has no idea. Like they're not going to be able to understand it the way that I do. So it comes back to this like full crazy circle of like I don't know if it's like tricks, but it's just like ways like brands will lean in on something in hopes that a consumer's not going to go through all these kind of steps to learn about it.
Yeah, and even if they do read a study, they're going to read the abstract only and take it away from what they see, but they actually won't go into the methodology of the study and actually what happened. Like, was it an in vitro study? Yada, yada, yada. So, like, and not to mention, like, brands are now going out and trademarking ingredients, a marketing trademark, which then comes off as a brand ingredient. And then they put the fucking thing on the bottle. So it's like,
it's like you're licensing a license. Like, it's one of these things where like you're asking to use a branded ingredient, but you want to create your own.
I will tell you,
you're seeing that, and you're seeing also just like contract manufacturers, like kind of just take a certain purity of a certain ingredient that they have access to and then branding it, even though it's really like a common product that you could find out and sourced other places.
100%. I mean, you look at, I think you correct me if I'm wrong, but like your brand of the year was like 1 and 2 was Ghost Redcon in that, right? Yeah. Right. And so was ours. They don't, Ghost uses a little bit more in terms of brand ingredients, but like you will not find a brand ingredient logo on their containers. You will not. Like, I'm trying to think at Ghost right now, going through some Ghost stuff. I don't think I can remember one. If it is, it's very small. But the only thing, like I said, the only branded or any sort of third-party external things which are relevant in our space would be a licensed flavor like Ghost does, throwing Sour Patch Kids on there. That's meaningful. I think that entices somebody to actually purchase. If it's a Joshua Shaw approved or a Fitness Informant approved supplement, that's it. Those 3 logos are the only 3 that matter at this point. NSF matters, but like, yeah, it's crazy to me how many people like put a ton of real estate into that. When your real estate on your product label, on your website, any place in which you have stuff, it is valuable real estate, and you should leverage that to sell your product. Not necessarily like a lot of these like formulators just like try to toot their own horn. Like, look at all these brand ingredients I just used. Yeah, it's impressive, but the consumer doesn't give a shit. So like, get the consumer to buy the product. I want to wrap up the show in like the next 5 minutes talking about like delivery mechanisms, because we talked about that. You go into CPG or foods and you see these different package designs like bags, and you see different cartons. And in our space, it is primarily these tubs. Like that's it, and a lot of it has cost. But I mean, you and I both know margins in this space. Like, there's some pretty good margins on some of these products. Yeah. We could do some really cool stuff, but we haven't. Do you think it's just because like it's just the standard, it's the norm, and it works, and we just don't need to, or are people just scared to be adventurous to try something new?
I think it's laziness a lot of times. It's also just the complexity. And this is, again, not to talk down about the entrepreneurs in the space, but a lot of times they default to the easiest thing because they don't have the background or maybe the know-how of how to do it. So would they know to go and hire a design firm to create some custom packaging? And then how do they go and source that? And then is their contract manufacturer going to be able to handle those different packaging designs and things of that nature? I think all of those questions start to just jumble people's minds, and they go, I give up. Like, I'd rather just default to the easiest thing. So you're not really seeing a lot of that. What you are starting to see, and I think you're going to see more of, is that people are utilizing more like the pouches or like single serve packets or things like that, because I think that gets into a more convenience aspect to it, where you could create a protein bar, you could create an energy drink, or use something that's single serve, convenient nutrition. But there's also ready to mix powders that work well in little single serves or things like that, where you could take what you're already doing but applying it to like some of the new trends that are going to maybe work a little bit better, and those actually have a little bit more cost, but you have consumer that's interested in adding convenience to their lives, and they're willing to pay up a little bit extra. Just like think about a protein bar cost you $3 a serving or whatever, but you could get the same amount of protein for whatever it is, like $1 or 75 cents or something like that. But it's a matter of you'd have to then put it in a baggie, you need to bring a shaker, you need to find water, you need to do all these types of things. And I think that is why a consumer buys protein bars, because it's portable and it's convenient and it's easy. But there's things you could do from a packaging standpoint on traditional products to lean in on that side.
Yeah, and that's one way to stand out both in brick and mortar and on a digital shelf too. Like being in a pre-workout in a pouch. Not saying I want that, but like that would look different when you're scrolling through Amazon. That would look different when you're scrolling through bodybuilding.com, like on the screen. And maybe there's a sustainability play there too, less plastic or whatever. I mean, I mean, whether or not you care about that, like that's something you could also tout, and you'd also have the same amount of real estate. Like I think of, I don't know if you ever heard of the brand Vade Nutrition. They were on Shark Tank, and they had worked with me right when before they even got on Shark Tank. But it was single serve protein that had basically like a vegetable based wrap around it, so it dissolved. So you put in, you had these little pellets or whatever, and you threw them in there. It dissolved. It was good protein. Like that delivery mechanism was so different, and it came in a pouch. It was unique. For me, it's like when I traveled, I loved it. Like I took them with me when I traveled, and it was like, this is great. And I don't have to like take scoops out in baggies anymore. Like it was a cool concept, a little bit different. Is it good for somebody who's consuming protein every single day at home? Well, you don't have to measure your scoop out. You already have your predetermined scoop size. It's convenient, so I think it works. And obviously, they got invested in on Shark Tank, and I don't know how they're doing now. But like, those are just different delivery mechanisms that I've seen. But outside of that, and there's a bunch of, like you mentioned, the single serve stuff. Like you buy a pouch and you get like a bunch of single serve pre-workouts or nootropics and things of that nature. But it's been pretty much stagnant. Like I mean, you watch like Alex Ardente's Sups movie, and you look at some of the first Sups that came out. It looks just like it does today. I mean, besides the label design, like it's the same tub. Like there was No Explode, and the No Explode tub still exists today in different variations. So I would challenge, like I would like to see something in 2020 happen, like something to come out that was a little bit different, just unique. And there are brands I think that have the balls to do it, or at least have like that personality to do it in our space. I just don't know if we're going to see it.
I haven't released this video yet, and I guess like if we're doing Back to the Future type of thing, it might be out by the time this goes live. But basically one of the trends of like 2020 that I'm talking about, and I honestly think I'm a little bit early on it for the space of sports nutrition, is around sustainability. I think that's where people are going to start to look at packaging differently, because consumers are going to start to ask those questions and say, like, what are your sustainability practices in certain elements? And we're using plastics, we're using single serves, we're using things that are not maybe the ways of some of these other bigger consumer packaged goods categories that are innovating to get to this more sustainable footing, because consumers are not only asking for it, but they're willing to pay more for it. So then you don't really have to worry about, do I have to give out a bunch of my margin? Maybe at the beginning, because the project's going to cost you some money to change over a bunch of your stuff. But over time, it's either you're going to get it back for the near term, but then in the long term, consumers are going to look at you and go, you don't do this? Well, I can't buy you. It's not going to happen. And I think you're starting to see, I know a couple of the trade shows I went to, more on the business to business side of the industry, you saw some different companies come out with some different, recyclable, compostable packaging, different things that are starting to finally get away from just these traditional plastic packaging that we're used to. So if it's anything is going to drive this, I think it's going to be consumers that are going to say, we need more sustainable packaging. We are going to support those by buying them. And then a brand's going to go, well, I want a piece to that. I think I looked at a stat recently, like Nielsen said, I think 2022 or something, they'll have, it's going to be $150 billion in purchasing towards sustainable products in CPG. So it's huge. It's not like this is like a small, like bleeding edge trend. Right. It just hasn't hit the sports nutrition industry yet. So I honestly think that could drive some of the changes, because right now there's really not a driver that's actually telling brands to go, oh, maybe I need to make a change. Like maybe that is the change that could happen. I don't know.
We've talked about this before, but you look at Generation Z, born mid 90s, so say 1995 to present. A lot of those people probably aren't utilizing sports nutritional supplements yet. I mean, they're still, they're in their maybe lower 20s or in their teens, but sustainability is super important to them. And so is, like we talked about, cause marketing. So, like, those are your purchasers coming through the funnel. They're going to be looking for sustainability in terms, you think of the amount of plastic tubs that I have in my house alone of sports nutritional supplements. Yes, I recycle them, but we're ultimately what happens with that. And so the one issue that we have in our industry with some of the compostable packaging that's out there is like with this pre-workout I'm holding is like there needs to be a decent seal because you can't really let moisture in. But I think there's ways to combat that, and I think the smart people are going to figure that out. And I think you're right. I think we will see it in our space eventually. It probably might not be 2020 yet. Like you said, you're probably ahead of the curve on this one. But it would be cool to see a brand come out with like a fully compostable product line, like within sports nutrition, because like for me and for we benefit. Like the for me benefit is this pre-workout is going to help get you going in the gym, and for we it's going to help save the earth or save the planet. Like not to be a tree hugger by any means, but like it's important. It really is because like we degrade the earth, like then it doesn't matter if you get to the gym or not; it just doesn't exist. So it'll be interesting. So I would challenge brands to do something cool and creative and innovative this year, and I would love to see like some compostable package design. I think that'd be cool. Like if you could somehow do a cardboard something, or I look at like a brand like Arms Race Nutrition has a label on it that looks like paper. Like, is there a way you can actually make a package out of that? Like that would be cool to see. And also I think it would be so uniquely different that people would be like, I need to buy that. Like it's a way to stand out. So 2 Guys 1 Shaker Cup, Facebook. You can check us out on our podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify, watch via YouTube. Jay Shaw Consulting, Josh Shaw. You have some exciting stuff going on in 2020. I'm pretty stoked for you, my friend. I mean, you shared something with me over the weekend that it's minor, but it's cool. Like
we're gonna make some minor changes. I think each year I try to build off of what I built the year before, and I had a lot of momentum this year, but I think 2020 is kind of setting up to be a pretty big one for me. So I'm going to try to do the best I can on my side to set myself up for success.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a busy year, a busy year. So
I like that.
All right, until next time, boys and girls, behave yourselves and have a good 2020.